wearing uniforms, doing exercises, and defending their country. This is how we usually imagine the daily life of soldiers. However, there are armies in this world where things are completely different. That's why we want to show you some really unusual armies in this video. These include armed forces that look like they've stepped out of a science fiction movie, an army inside another army, or a force that's been around for over 500 years. So stay tuned here at Wisefool. We begin with an extremely unusual army from an unusual country. That is, the Bhutanese Armed Forces. The small South Asian kingdom is considered one of the happiest countries in the world because its ruler prioritizes the promotion of conservation and the well-being of its people over economic development. Because the country has these priorities, the army was only introduced there in 1950. This was in response to an invasion by the Chinese People's Liberation Army. Because Bhutan is a very peaceful country and its king avoids conflict with other states, the approximately 6,000 soldiers in Bhutan's armed forces are not usually trained for combat missions, but mainly perform duties that serve to protect the environment. Bhutan is the most environmentally friendly country in the world and produces less CO2 than it sequesters. To stay that way and improve its carbon footprint, Bhutan's armed forces regularly plant trees and keep nature clean. They also build roads and bridges, helping their people achieve the ultimate goal of the state, which is to increase happiness. However, the fact that Bhutan's armed forces are so unusually peaceful also means the troops, which are personally led by the king, are poorly suited for warfare. For example, when they had to fight against Indian separatist groups some 20 years ago, there were huge casualties on the Bhutanese side because of their martial experience. Let us continue with an army that does not actually officially exist. But let's take things in order. In Costa Rica, 1 in 5 people live below the poverty line, and the country has significantly higher expenditures in its revenues. So, there has been no army since 1949. This makes Costa Rica the only country in Central America without its own army. To ensure the state can defend itself against attacks from other countries in an emergency, Costa Rica relies on an unusual solution. The police can be used as an army for defense. Although it's difficult to imagine a village policeman suddenly transforming into an operational soldier on command, in Costa Rica, the story is different. Due to the constant confrontations with drug cartels, the police in Costa Rica are highly trained in military matters, and the country can quickly deploy an army if needed. The next army on our list is just downright bizarre. Uganda's so-called super soldiers. An army made up mostly of former rebels are seen by their neighbors as a band of bandits rather than a military force. This is because training is inadequate and the soldiers are often criminals whom the people fear. Their equipment, like tanks, consists mainly of old remnants of the Soviet Union. To the outside world, that is, to other countries, the Ugandan army nevertheless wants to make a well-equipped and progressive impression. In public appearances, the armed forces are completely ridiculed in this effort. In the military parade, which you can see here, the army wanted to pretend to have state-of-the-art cyborg combat uniforms that turn their wearers into super soldiers like in a sci-fi movie, thanks to an exoskeleton inside them, among other things. However, observant onlookers quickly realized that they were just makeshift Halloween costumes without any function. The supposed hydraulic pipes in the battlesuits were just old bicycle pipes. Even the tanks on display in the military parade were mostly cardboard on the inside. With over 2 million soldiers, China has the largest army in the world. And of course, there must be somewhere with the world's smallest army. How small it actually is, however, is quite impressive. Despite a population of 2.2 million, the Gambia has a total of only about 1,000 soldiers. It is therefore not surprising that the West African country troops have the smallest budget of any army in the world, just 14 million euros per year. Because it's too small to wage wars against other countries or defend its own country, the Gambian army mainly assists in missions of allied states. The armed forces hope that other countries will help their country in case of an emergency. In terms of physical fitness, the Gambian Army football team plays in the highest football league in the country and has even won the championship once. The next army on our list is even smaller. However, it is not officially counted as an army, but as a military corps. The Pontifical Swiss Guard is usually referred to as the smallest army in the world, as it has just 135 soldiers protecting the Vatican State, the Pope's headquarters. And because the Vatican City State, which in turn is officially the smallest state in the world, has no other army, the Swiss Guard is its army. Since 1505, when the Pope asked Switzerland to send an army to protect the Vatican, the Pontifical Swiss Guard has been composed entirely of Catholic Swiss. Anyone wishing to join this unusual army must have a clean criminal record, be athletic, be at least 1.4 meters tall, and be between 19 and 30 years old. The guards wear colorful traditional uniforms with puffy trousers and are armed with, among other things, swords. But even if the whole thing is more reminiscent of a carnival, the guards are well trained in military matters and have also been trained in the use of firearms. Although they only receive an annual salary of 15,600 euros for their service, this is tax-free, and the guards don't pay for their own food or accommodation. Speaking of the Swiss, we would like to mention the unusual mode of operation of the Swiss Army. Unlike the troops of other countries, there are hardly any professional or permanent soldiers in Switzerland. Instead, all Swiss male citizens are required to complete basic military training. Those who refuse must pay 3% of their income to the state for the rest of their lives. Once soldiers complete their military training, they are automatically placed in the reserve and are therefore obligated to fight for their country in the event of a war. In order to be ready for action at any time, each soldier even receives a personal firearm to take home with them. On paper, the Swiss Army consists of a staggering 200,000 soldiers. In reality, however, 95% of them are reservists. We continue with one of the largest and yet most antiquated armies in the world, namely the North Korean Army. Including reservists, the troops number 6 million soldiers, and this with a population of only 26 million. Every citizen is obligated to serve. While the mandatory service for women is 7 years, all men have a mandatory military service of 11 years. The military is the top priority in North Korea. But even though about a quarter of North Korea's total gross domestic product goes to the military, it is still one of the worst equipped militaries in the world. In terms of technology, it is about on par with the 1960s. And because embargoes mean it cannot import arms from other countries, it uses almost exclusively old Soviet and Chinese equipment. North Korea constantly holds huge military parades with elaborate choreographies that impress with a huge number of soldiers. Finally, we come to an army that is extremely unusual, and that is the Brazilian Army. In the Brazilian Army, women are represented in very large numbers in the troops. And not just in numbers, because they occupy a disproportionate number of important leadership positions. The fact that this has been possible is due to the special promotion of women. In the 1980s, Brazil was the first South American country to accept women into the military. And that's not all. Mainly women are accepted who have at least a degree and who are then specially trained in various fields. What sounds progressive, however, has a sad background. Women in Brazilian civil society are usually much worse off than men, and often suffer from poverty and domestic violence. As such, the Brazilian military is considered a pioneer, and is specifically promoting women in order to change this. Write in the comments which army made you the biggest impression. Leave a like if you found this video interesting, and subscribe. Bye, and see you next time here at Wise Fool.